Hi, this is Paul Neale at Penn Productions, and I'm just doing a quick tutorial in Unreal Engine UE4 on how to make a light flash on and off using blueprints. I just have a really simple scene that I'm using here, and I'm going to drop a light into it. You can either drop your lights in through your modes, go and find a light if you like, or you can hold down L and just click in a place and it'll actually create a light. You could change its class by clicking on it and replace that actor with whatever type you want. But this is the one that we want. We want a light here. We just, it looks like it's good enough. We're going to make a light just flash right here in front of this building. And so with that light picked, we can add a blueprint up at the top here. We've that light selected and say add blueprint. And I want to add it, I'm just going to add it in the same folder that it's here, blueprint, right, light create. And I'll just expand fully here. And you can see that star was up there, so I'm just going to save it right away. With the event graph is where we want to be, and the event graph allows us to be able to build visual coding using blueprints. And so what we're going to have to start with here is we're going to need the event tick, and we're going to build off of this and start building in the light and whatnot. So I'm going to grab the light component and just drag it down in so we have something to start with. And with that light component now, so this is the light that's going to be controlled. And here's the event tick, and the event tick is going to tick over. So as the game plays, this event tick is constantly ticking. And with it constantly ticking, we want it to drive something. We want it to tell it to actually cause something to happen. And so we're going to just drag out from it, and we're going to say set, and you'll see there's all these different set nodes that can be used. And we're going to say set space intensity. Intensity, there it is. And so this is a point light component here, so we can grab that, and you can see that it's given it to us as well, this light component. So it knew that we wanted to use it because that's what we're attaching it to, and it's obviously a set intensity on a light. So we didn't need the original one. We could have just typed that in and dragged it out. So what's going to happen now is the event tick is going to tick over, and it is going to fire this set intensity as it ticks. So that's where this execute connection comes in. So it's connecting to it and saying fire this for every single tick. It's saying the target, it's going to be the light itself. It's going to be used. And here's the new intensity. So what we could do is we could just type in an intensity, for instance, and I'll say something like 10,000. So it's just crazy high. Let's compile. Let's save. Let's go back to our level. And you'll see that we still have the intensity control here, and we can, dial that up and down. And there's the intensity. But when I hit play on the game now, you can see that the light's intensity may have changed. So I could take this all the way down really low and set play, and you'll see that the light's back up again because that's 10,000 right now. So it's really, really high, probably higher than it can go. And it's just setting the light on, even if we have it off here. So let's go back to our blueprint and increase this a little bit more. What we're probably going to want is some sort of value to come into here that we can actually change that intensity with and have it control this intensity in the blueprint now instead of the original intensity spinner that really isn't doing us any good at this point in time. So to do that, we're going to make a new variable here over on the left-hand side and say variable, and in intensity, and we'll see that it comes up over on the right-hand side now under details and allows you to, again, change the variable name as well as the variable type. Currently, by default, it comes up as Boolean, which is just an on-off 0, 1. We're going to want to float. We're going to want a value that can float between values. The other thing we're going to want to turn on is the instance editable. Instance editable is going to allow it to actually come up in the properties of the light when we have it selected so that we can adjust it. So we can also put in a tooltip here or whatever else. We'll go back to that if we want. And it says, please compile the blueprint to get a default value. So let's compile it. And here's the default intensity. So let's just go and type in 1,000, for instance, right now for the default intensity. And we'll work with that. With this variable, we can now drag it in and say get the value. And so we're going to get that intensity value now. So with that get parameter in there. This is an intensity spinner, and I'm going to hook it up into the intensity instead of just typing it directly in. Let's compile, save, head on back over, and now you should find down here under default, there's our intensity for the actual playback at playback time. So with it cranked to whatever we want, we can go to play the level again. You can see that the value is now controllable. Let's just take the intensity here to 0. And so you can see that it's 0. We can set the intensity down here in the default now for game time. You can see that the light is on now. So I'm just going to leave this one up so we kind of know it's there a little bit. And we're going to work with this intensity and try and drive that up and down over time. So as this intensity is going to be set over time, so the light is going to fade up, fade down, fade up, fade down. So what we need to do is we need to get game time. There it is. Get game time in seconds. So the game time in seconds will return a value for us for how long we've been playing the game. And let's just plug that straight in at this point in time. And again, compile, save, and we'll test. And so we can sit there and wait and say, well, it's actually the time is being pumped into the intensity of the light. And the light was really giving us decent values around 1,000. So we'd have to wait 1,000 seconds before we're going to start seeing decent light here. So let's get back out, just hit escape. And let's throw in a multiply here. And so we can find this a couple ways. One, if we just look for float values, we'll actually find float times float. And so let's use a float times float. Let's take the seconds into float times float, and let's pump that into the intensity. And then let's give some sort of multiplier here. And let's say, 100. And again, compile, save, go back to our game, and hit play. And now you can see the light slowly growing in intensity over time. So we've sort of increased the the time value. So you can see it slowly growing and getting larger and larger that time. So that's increasing this. We could plug our intensity into this value if you want. So that's going to get us a multiplication of that value now of time. What we really want to be able to do now is we really want to be able to get it to go up and down. And so what we need is we need a sine curve. So let's go find that, sine, and sine radians will work fine. And what sine is going to do is it's going to give us a sine curve for the output value. So as the value comes out, as the value increases, and goes back and forth. So as the value increases from a value of 0 to whatever and goes up, our sine curve will go and do this back and forward, because that's what sine does. As you pump a value into it, it's going to go back and forward. Now it's going to top out a value of 1, and it's going to go down to a -1. So that's what sine is going to return. Remember the good old days of doing your trig and working out angles and whatnot back in high school math. So as our value gets larger and gets pumped into the sine, our sine is going to give us this wavy line back and forth. So with that noted, this is going to go back and forth. So let's plug that directly in at this point in time. Compile, save, and hit play again. And so now with that sine, we're getting a value between -1 and 1 as it goes up and down. So this is going to be, not show us anything, because we need higher values for our light in the first place. So let's multiply this up again. So let's go back to our float, and we're going to go float times float again. And so let's take the value that's coming out of sine and let's pump that in. I'm just going to shove some of this over here so we've got a bit more room. And let's increase the amount, the value that's being output here. And let's use our intensity to drive that. So we're going to multiply the sine curve by our intensity. And again, compile, save, run our game test again. You can see the lights just flickering on and off like crazy. Let's see why that is. We're increasing the time in seconds by a factor of 100. So the time in seconds is going up really, really quickly at this point in time. Let's take this just down to 1, for instance, and multiply it just by 1. So the value in seconds is staying, just normal time. And again, compile, save, back, hit play. And so now you'll see it go up and go back down again, and it'll disappear for a little bit. And the reason it's disappearing for a little bit is it's going into a negative value, and it's basically becoming a black hole for the same amount of time as it's coming on. So we might want that, but we might want to also offset the value a little bit and have the value pushed up, and never reach that negative value. So let's go and add. I believe it's add. No, it's not that one. It's again float. I gotta remember float plus float. We're looking for, and we are going to go and take the sine curve as it comes out, and it's going to come out as a -1 to 1. So we're going to pop that in there, and then plug in our plus into our multiplication again for the intensity, and we're going to add 1 to it so that if it returns 1, it's going to return 2. If it returns -1, it's going to return 0. So compile, save, and now we should have a light that goes off, so it fades off and goes off and then comes right back on again because it's reaching 0 and then coming straight back up again. So that's working, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a floor variable here to control this. So we've got this. So I'm going to call this floor. And with floor, we'll make it editable instance, and it's going to be a float value again, and we can compile. Let's give it a default value of 1, and I want to drop that, say get, and plug it into our plus. So we've got a floor value here now. Again, let's compile, save. We can take a look. We've now got an intensity and a floor value that we can deal with. So if we didn't want it to go completely off, we could say 2, for instance, and now it's going to only reach a value of 1. It's not really a true floor value at this point in time. We could play around with this, and you'll see where we're going with it eventually. You could make it look like a true floor value, so it only reaches a value of 1. That'd be next step. So let's make all this work. So the next one is we want to plug in a variable, and this one's called period. And period is the point-to-point in your. So when sine is returning this, from here to here is called period. So that point in time which it cycles through is the period. So we are going to make sure that we add in a variable for that and set a variable in here. So we've got our period variable. Let's say editable instance again. It's a float value. We're going to drag that out, get, and we're going to plug period in. So we can make it cycle on and off as we need it. So that's going to be the cycling part. This is going to be our lowest value essentially. Be the lowest value -1 at this current time. And then here's our intensity, how high it's going to go up. So again, compile, save. We can go over to our light now. We can use these. So we got a period of 0 here, so it's not going to do anything at all. That should have a default value, I guess. So our period should probably have a default value maybe of 1. So it's just a value of 1. And that'll be back to our original setup now. If I hit play, you can see the light now fade down. It doesn't go completely off because we have our floor set at 2, so it gets down to a value of 1, if you remember. And now it's going up and down slowly. We might want to increase that, so we could say, let's set the period to 2. And now you can get the period going up and down a little faster. Let's try maybe a period of 3. And here's our light flashing on and off. What's nice now is anytime you want a light that works like this, we've got a blueprint for it. So we could easily add other lights to our scene using this same blueprint. So because we've generated that, I could, for instance, add one up here just by taking our blueprint and dropping our light here. And you can see it's got the same settings, so I can say let's make it a period of 4 up here. Our floor value is going to be higher. It's going to be a 5, and our intensity is at 1,000 here. So this one's going to go up and down. You can see it pulsating up and down a little bit. And so let's give it more of a value. And you can see it now. It's just completely blowing out, and needs lots of other settings to make it look good. Attenuation radius, maybe. Attenuation radius. The light color, and whatever else it might be. So there you go. There's a blueprint that is now allowing you to control a light and get it to phase up and down over time really easily using blueprints. Thanks.